Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Doctor is In series. This is episode 213. I can't believe that we're all the way into the 200s already. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since 2009. And this series, which is becoming a fan favorite, is co-hosted by the one and only Dr. Abby Morono. Dr. Abby, thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm Dr. Abby Morono. I'm a behavioral scientist and professor of psychology. I'm the director of education at Social Engineer and a nonverbal communication expert and coach. I specialize in nonverbal communication, trustworthiness, and the psychological mechanisms that underpin human decision making.
And you got your PhD right today.
I did.
So congratulations.
I don't think I actually said what my PhD is in today. I just completely ignored it.
Yeah. That's the best thing to do because, we keep getting it wrong, thanks to me.
Yes.
This episode is sponsored by I don't know. This episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer LLC. And let's talk about training. Since the director of education is here, we get a lot of emails asking for our schedule. So we finally got our schedule up on the website. You have a course coming up in June, which is our practical application of social engineering. That's a virtual course. So you can join Shelby and Patrick for that one. Then we have two foundational courses, one in July here in Orlando and one in Bucharest, Romania in September. And there'll be a lot more training classes coming out on the website for our master's level, which we have something new and special about that. We also are working really hard. People have been asking what's new and coming out. Abby is working really hard on our first audio course, which will be all about elicitation. So really excited about that. On the website, you can sign up for keeping in touch with us and information about our new courses. We have a lot of people interested in our psychology course coming out as well as some others. So we'll keep everyone informed here on the podcast of when those things are available. But keep checking out social-engineer.com. Right now, also, what's really exciting, if you go to the top of the website, our State of Vishing report for 2023 is out, and it's been downloaded tens of thousands of times. There's a lot of great conversations happening about that report. A real good analysis of information in there of over 83,000 phone calls that social engineer agents here have made, as well as 1.3 million tweets. Is that what it is, Abby?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something over 1 million tweets all about phone phishing, phone fraud, scams, things like that. Check out what that data analysis provides for you as far as education for you and your company. You can download that for free on the social-engineer.com site. Also, if you're into social engineering and it's something that really is a passionate topic for you, you can join us on our Slack channel. You can find the link in the show notes down below, or you can ping either Abby or I on LinkedIn or any other social media, and we'll get you that link. It's a free channel to join, and we have over 1,500 people in there now every day talking about social engineering. It's a family-friendly channel. We don't condone illegal activity or harassment of any kind. So if that sounds like you, come on in and join us and have a great time talking about social engineering. We even have a group that meets twice a month to do practice sessions and how to use these type of skills in conversation. So you can find anything you're really looking for in there, and it's a really great group of people that are willing to help and wanting to help. So join us in that channel. I also want to invite everybody to take a moment to go visit InnocentLivesFoundation.org. If you're not familiar with the group over there, it's a nonprofit organization that was started over 5.5 years ago with a mission to help law enforcement geolocate people who traffic children and harm children and create child abuse material. I cannot be prouder of the group of people that we have there. Close to 40 volunteers and 5 full-time employees working hard each and every day to help bring awareness to the problems that children have to fight on the internet with sexploitation and sextortion, as well as actively helping stop traffickers. We're not a vigilante group. We're a nonprofit group that works closely with law enforcement. If this sounds like something you want to support, you can do so in 2 ways. You can jump over to the website and you can volunteer your time, either to help us with the mission itself, or if you have other skills like fundraising or marketing or things like that you want to join the fight in, you can sign up to do that. Or we're a nonprofit, so you can donate money, which always helps us continue with the cause. So go over to InnocentLivesFoundation.org if you want to volunteer, or if you're a caregiver or a parent, you're looking for information on how to keep your kids safe. It's all there. We want to take everyone over to that website and join us in congratulating the team for all the good work they do. We're up to 490 cases now, and probably even more when this podcast comes out. And last but not least, if you're enjoying the music at the intro and outro of this podcast, that is none other than the best rock and roll band on planet Earth, Clutch. We love those guys and they love us, and they've been good friends of ours and supporters of ILF for years. So give them some love by going to pro-rock.com, download their stuff, go see them live. That's the best way to listen to their music, and give them a big thanks for all they do to support ILF and giving us awesome music. Okay, now before we get to our topic today, I need to address something that maybe some of you saw if you're listening to this episode of the podcast, because it happened on this. We had on our YouTube channel, someone who made a comment that we would consider bordered on hate speech. The comment accused me and negated my beliefs, and accused me of negating my own beliefs and exploiting Abby because of her looks. Both of these comments are insanely false, and we just won't stand for it. Abby and I enjoy a wonderful working relationship, which is based on mutual respect for each other and mutual respect for our beliefs, even if those beliefs don't agree at times. We enjoy this relationship because we can have a disagreement without being disagreeable. It's called being an adult and having a mature conversation. I love the fact that Abby brings science into our company, that she loves to read scientific papers, that she finds enjoyment in that, because not many of us do, and that she keeps us current, myself, my company current in what is related to science, and helping us bring that science to our company. We have said this multiple times on the podcast. We're a company committed to making sure that we use current scientific understanding and trying to help people learn how the decisions that we make can be manipulated or influenced, and that how we can keep people safe understanding this. And having Abby as part of our company has been something that's really helped us make that movement forward. So when we see comments like that, we delete them, and we ban those kind of people from our Slack channels, from our YouTube channels, or from being able to interact with us at any point. If any of our listeners saw that comment and had to sadly read that, we apologize for that being on our channel. We won't stand for it. And Abby and I both want to say that kind of statement is false. And even though Abby and I might not always agree on everything, we are able to express our beliefs and the things that we understand openly. And we don't always have to see eye to eye just to be able to have a conversation or work together. I don't know if you have anything you want to say, Abby, on that.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And like you said, we can disagree, but in a respectful manner, and we won't stand for hate speech in any form.
So we're going to not talk about that anymore because it's negative, and that's not what the podcast is about. So, Abby, you always choose topics for this series of the podcast. What is our topic for today?
Our topic for today is false memories. This is a topic that I love because I did my undergraduate degree in forensic psychology. So it's a topic that came up a lot, and we're going to talk about some traditional studies. But we're not just going to focus on forensic psychology. We're going to talk about false memories in every sense. Okay,
so first of all, let's define it.
Yep.
Because I know I have had this in my life, right? I have had memories that in my brain, I know 100% are true, but then my siblings will say that never happened. This is the way it happened. And there's 3 of them and 1 of me, and they're all telling me a very similar story, but I'm like, no, I remember it this way. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes. So memory processes and systems, although they are typically reliable, they're prone to errors and distortions and illusions as well. Because human memory is not a complete system, and it's not a reproductive route. Like when you take a picture with a camera, what you see is what was there. When you remember something, we recreate it, and it's a very complex process. We have to construct the memory. We don't just pull it out exactly as it was. We reconstruct it, and it's influenced by things like our current knowledge, our attitudes, and our beliefs. So we're going to dive into, what kind of distortions and why we might distort our memories. What are the drivers behind that?
Yeah, that's a little fascinating. Those three areas that you're saying that they can kind of alter us, because I know I've read lots of research on eyewitness testimony, and a lot of researchers even say like eyewitness testimony should not be allowed in court because it's so messed up. Do you find that to be the truth in the research you've read?
Yep, absolutely. And we are going to cover eyewitness testimony because it is such a prominent issue, and we don't rely as much on eyewitness testimony now as we did for those reasons. But I think when we think about false memories, that is what we think about. We think about the forensic context. we don't think about the fact that, well, my childhood memories or my everyday memories could possibly be false or altered, because we think of it like a camera. We think that we're immune to this fact, but we're not, because memory is flawed.
And that's a funny point, because like when I was saying in the beginning with my siblings, even when they tell me, well, this is what the three of us remember, I still don't remember it. Like it doesn't become my memory. Like it didn't change my memory of it. If you 10 minutes later, if you were to walk in and say, hey, tell me this story, I would tell you the same thing that's up here still, even though they tell me that's not what happened.
And that's the thing about memory. It's so confronting, because we spoke about perception being reality on a previous podcast. And if you have this reality of how things happened, it's how you remember it. If someone's saying, well, it didn't happen that way, you can access your memory and say, well, this is my reality of it. It's not just them challenging a memory, it's them challenging your reality. So it is very confronting when we are faced with evidence now of why memory is flawed. We can go, yeah, I accept that. Not mine, though, because I remember it happening this way.
Now, that is an interesting point, because the idea of it challenging your reality, like especially if you remembered something, let's say really positively or negatively, and then someone comes in and they have a wholly different memory of it being the opposite of how, I can imagine that would be really challenging for your reality, because you're like, wait, no, that wasn't that good. This was a horrible thing in my childhood, and you're telling me it was awesome. Like, I can imagine that would be something really difficult to manage.
Yep, and that brings us to one of our first points, that one of the reasons that memory is distorted is because we are motivated towards having a positive view of the self. So we want to remember ourselves positively, and we protect and enhance our view of ourselves by forgetting details about our moral transgressions. So instead of thinking, God, I did this bad thing, we just forget about it because I couldn't do this bad thing. But we remember our morally praiseworthy deeds. In general, obviously, we have a lot of shame over moral transgressions, but the normal, healthy person that doesn't suffer from, say, mood disorders, they are motivated to see themselves positively. Now, the reason I say about suffering from mood disorders is because we know that their view of their self is motivated slightly differently. But on average, when people want to recall things about themselves, they want to remember themselves positively. So they forget those, little transgressions, couldn't have been me. That challenges my reality of myself.
That's fascinating. And I was going to ask, so I'm glad you answered it, about the people who may be suffering from some kind of mood disorder, because I thought, like when you said that, I'm like, well, I know some people that really don't have a very good view of themselves. So can that work? And I'm glad you answered that.
Yeah, there's a lot of research to say that we want to kind of keep in this current state of feeling, and how we feel about ourselves, we want to maintain it. Now, the average person wants to feel positively about themselves. When we suffer from mood disorders, a lot of the time, even though the ultimate goal is to feel good, the proximal goal for them is to kind of stay feeling bad. And a lot of the time what they do is pull out information, memories, or information from things people have said. They perceive things slightly differently to try and maintain this negative self-view. But in general, as we said, we try and pull out information to maintain a positive self-view, because also most of us are motivated by ego. It is a natural human phenomenon to be ego-driven to some degree. So we want to try and maintain that positive view of the self.
So even if someone's not like when I think of that, we're not thinking of someone who's arrogant or
no.
Okay. So we're not saying
so
like
more so if you are arrogant,
right.
For example, the higher in narcissism, the more you're going to want to think positively about yourself. And we know with individuals who are narcissistic, they have this motivation towards positive self-view to a really, extreme degree. But every human being has an ego. We all are ego driven. It is just part of being human being. We want to be liked. We want to feel good about ourselves. And with that comes the need to feel good about ourselves and think positively about ourselves. But it doesn't mean that you are egotistical.
Okay, that's a good balance, right? Because we want to make sure people understand what we're saying with that. So give me an example that's maybe not so deep and dark, of how this works.
So when we remember our past moral transgressions, we want to maintain now that we are better than we were. So what we might do is either forget past moral transgressions, or we want to maintain that we have improved. So we want to imagine them as worse as they were, or more worse than they were. So if we want this idea that I've grown, I'm a better person, I'm a great person, I might recall a past event as worse than it was, so that I can now show that I have improved more than I have.
Wow. Okay, this feels like a therapy session right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've probably done this 1,000 times in my life.
Yeah.
And remembered a situation that maybe wasn't nearly as bad, but made it really bad. So that way I could think I improved more than I actually have.
Because we want this positive perception of, personal, ethical, and moral growth. And sometimes when we haven't got that, we remember the past slightly differently, because I'm like, wow, look how much I've improved over time compared to what I was like.
And I feel depressed.
It doesn't have to be intentional. These aren't intentional things, because if they're intentional, then it's not a fault of memory. That is a drive to do so. These are things that we do unconsciously. We're not consciously saying, I want to feel better about myself, so I'm going to misremember my past. It's just something that happens because of these unconscious drivers.
Yeah, now I feel a little depressed, I think. Like you're blowing apart all my realities, Abby. Like I don't know how much I like this podcast anymore.
Well, the more positive we feel as well. So if you are in a really great mood and you feel really good about yourself, you're even more motivated to maintain it. So when we are in these really positive moods, we want to self-regulate this, and we do this through the recall of our memories. So if you're like, wow, I'm such a good person, it's like you're probably not as great a person as you think you are.
Okay, hang on. I got to text my therapist because I'm going to need to talk to someone real after we're done with this episode.
So let's put this kind of to the side, the positive self-view, and look at context.
Okay, please.
You mentioned about real world context, about, our past. But it's not just about, really severe or emotional memories. It can be about really basic memories. For example, let's look at an educational context. Some students might remember that they got more A grades than they actually did. So if you ask a bunch of students, what did you get in your GCSEs or A levels or whatever the American equivalent is, if you don't have the same tests that we do, you can then look at their transcripts, and what they're likely to say they achieved is higher than what they achieved. Now, sometimes this can be purposeful, but when you actually control for that, and you just say, just based on memory, it doesn't, it's not going to go anywhere, they misremember those test scores.
Yeah, I don't think I got any A's, so that's okay. Like, I think I can't remember any of them, so.
That's probably why.
Yeah, because I didn't get any. So there's none to actually, like if I got one, maybe I would have amplified it to, I got at least 4 or 5, but I didn't get any. So that's easy to not remember any. What's the danger? Is there a danger in this?
Well, there's a danger because if we have a distorted reality, it can lead us to make inaccurate choices. And we've talked about irrationality before. And if we base our decisions a lot of the time on our memory of events, it can lead us to have inaccurate choices. Irrational choices. And actually, that brings up a really good point because think about it in a medical context. Our medical choices are very important. How we choose to see ourselves physically and medically is very important for the choices we make in our lifestyle. Research has shown that this carries to a medical context too. So when they tested people for things like their cholesterol levels and cardiovascular risk category, participants were biased in the recall of the group that they were placed. So they perceived themselves as healthier than they were. And this has really serious consequences because you might not take your health risk more seriously as you need to, because you're like, oh, I wasn't put in such a high risk category, therefore it's not that serious, which can lead you to make very damaging choices.
I think that's a really valuable point, because I can recall in the past when I was much heavier, my cholesterol was always perfect, and my blood pressure was always perfect. So I would go to the doctor to get tested, and even though it was very clear I needed to lose weight to be healthier, my cholesterol was perfect and my blood pressure was perfect. So I kind of told myself, well, I'm healthy, right? I'm healthy. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what the paper says it. I'm healthy. And I had a doctor even say to me once, kind of as a joke, which I don't know how funny it is now, but he said, boy, if I didn't look at you, I would think you were the object of health, because my blood work was like, you're actually doing really good. So I kind of convinced myself I didn't need to change, because I was relatively healthy. Right. And that's interesting. I knew I did that, but I wasn't equating it to something like this. So it actually made me make some pretty bad health choices for many years before I did get healthy, because I was convincing myself, well, the paper says I'm good.
Exactly. And now imagine that of someone who really is being told that they're in a dangerous category. And now they don't want to believe that they are in that category, so they're going to misremember it. That person isn't in that category. They need to make different choices. And one of the biggest motivators for this, like if you don't really care about your health, you're unlikely to misremember your health information, because when things are central to our self-concept, so our self-concept is, if I said to you, who are you? You're going to reach into your self-concept of who you are to tell me who you are. It's those parts of you that are really valuable to you. Like if you ask me who I am, I'm a scientist. I value that part of myself. So when we remember things about the parts of ourselves that are really critical to our self-concept, those are the ones that we're going to want to tweak to be more positive. If you don't care about your health, and I said, what health category are you in? You're going to be like, oh, my health is terrible, because you don't care. If it is something you're insecure about, or something that you really value, whether it is because it's good or bad, or something you want to be good, you are more likely to tweak that into the more positive condition.
Yeah. Saying things like, well, I was just big boned. Right. Which is like, I don't know, the dumbest thing. Like
everybody's skeleton isn't identical.
Right. Like, no, I had bigger bones. That's just, well, it was. That's the only reason I was so big. And now that I lost weight, my bones have shrunk to normal skeletal size.
Yeah. That's how it works.
Science, right? We're basing it on science here. So
absolutely. Yeah.
But I remember actually saying things like that, like saying those statements, oh, I'm just, I'm perfectly healthy. My blood pressure, my cholesterol. I mean, I remember going for a blood test to get life insurance, and they were like, yeah, well, your cholesterol is great. So I was in that good health category. And you kind of ignore the bad news of, well, your weight put you in a different category, but your blood pressure is great and your cholesterol is great. It's just big bones.
Brings me to a good point. Our memories are things we haven't coded. So if we haven't encoded the memory, then it's not there. So say you're at the doctor's office and you're being told about your cholesterol group. If you are not paying attention and you don't encode that memory, when you recall, I was in this really healthy group, it's not a false memory. Like it's not one that you have recreated. It's one that you have literally created, because the memory wasn't encoded. So the memory was never created. So you've now just made one. You haven't altered one. And we can do that. If we don't pay attention, it's like if you're really, really tired and you're trying to study, it's not really going to work for you, because you're never going to encode the memory. So it isn't going to help you recall it later, because you can't make it into a memory. You can't make it into a new thing. So you're just going to have to create something later on. And we can do this. And sometimes it can be where we think, oh, well, it's a flaw pulling out the memory. No, it's actually a flaw that the memory was never there in the first place. And then you then have the false memory later, but for a different reason. And I love this topic because we can do it on serious issues, but there's so many fun studies here where they've planted like the most ridiculous memories. And there's one protocol where they get people to recall things that actually happened to them. And they ask them things that had happened and they write them down. And then later on, they ask them to recall these events, giving loads of details, but they input new events into these ones that they say are your real memories. And with this study, they've made people think that the famous one is they've told them that they were lost in a shopping, when you call them shopping malls, we call them shopping centers. And they believe that they were lost in a shopping center. There's ones that they remember riding a hot air balloon, being abducted by a UFO, which I just think is hilarious, that you can actually implant that memory and people are like, well, I guess I was abducted because I said I was abducted. This is what my memory writing says. So I guess I was. It's a memory now. But it just shows, it can be as serious as the UFO or as really mundane as being lost in a shopping center.
Huh. So is this the same as like therapists who say they help recall repressed memories?
No. So that is slightly different. When it comes to repressed memories, there's a lot of research on therapists that have said that they have found repressed memories of people who've been abused. When what's actually happened is the therapist has gone in with this idea of this person has probably been abused. And through their questioning, they have created a memory. And it's never usually with malice. There's so many studies on this, and there's so much research to show that this is a thing that has been a real problem in the clinical literature, because therapists go in with good intentions to pull out these memories to help, when actually what they're doing is creating it. And the reason is because there isn't actually any such thing as repression. The literature is very, very clear that repression isn't possible. We can't repress traumas. What we can do is suppress traumas. So there is a very big difference. Repression means that it's completely out of consciousness. Something terrible happened to you, so you get rid of it from consciousness. Because it is completely out of consciousness and it doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect you because it's completely repressed. Suppression is when we can't deal with it or we don't want to, so we put it out of sight. I like to think of it as we open a box, put it in a box, shut the lid and tuck it away. That still affects us in very minor ways that we don't realize is affecting us. But because it's suppressed, it's still there in the background. Now, that's what we do. There is too much evidence that our traumas and our past events still affect us in ways that we are unconscious of. But the point is that they affect us because they are suppressed. We have used our cognitive control processes to actively stop retrieval of that event. And that's what we do. And we can do it with practice. We can suppress with practice by purposefully stopping retrieval of it. And actually, there's research showing that parts of our brain that are used to recall, say the insula, which is about self-processing and the idea of ourself, we can actively shut down those regions of our brain when we don't want to remember things because they're too painful. And that is a purposeful thing that we do. Repression itself, it just doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny. And if you go in believing that it does, trying to pull out someone's repressed memories, especially if that person is in a very vulnerable state, it's very easy to implant a memory by accident.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was reading this, it wasn't like a research paper or anything, but it was an article on this legal school out in California that was talking to students about the problems with eyewitness testimony. So they set up a mock courtroom. And they did this thing where there was supposed to be some witnesses that were going to get interviewed by lawyers. And they have a video that they showed the person to watch. And this would be like, you were there in your car where you saw this scene. And they had a video, a guy running from this bar after he just committed a crime. And in the video, it's very clear, even though he was wearing a hoodie, that this was a white guy running from a bar and he looks pretty sketchy and whatever. Now, the video's done and they come up and they have this mock police officer who's going to ask this person questions. And they say to him, you were at, you were at Fred's bar at 11 p.m. Is that true? Yes, I was there. So you were sitting out in your car at 11 p.m. About to go in. Yes, I was. So you saw some of the scene after you heard the fight happen. Yes, I did. So at what time did you see the black man running from the bar?
Yeah.
And they go 11 p.m. And now they go through this whole line of questioning. And then later on, they ask the person, so from the video, what was the skin color of the person running from the bar? And they say it was a black man. And they go, are you sure? Are you 100% sure? And they're like, yep, it was a black man running from the bar. He was wearing a red hoodie and he ran from the bar at 11 p.m. I saw it clear as day. I remember it. Then they show the video again and they're like, how? Like, I'm not prejudiced. How did I know? And they said they went back to the line of questioning. And it was the cop saying, what time did the black man run from the bar?
Yeah, it's a leading question.
Yeah.
And this research stems with Elizabeth Loftus. And she is so famous in this field. She's pretty much the foundation of everything we know of false memories. And that study comes from the idea of, when did you see, or did you see this next to implant something? Mm. So you put it as kind of like not the point of the question, just in the question. And then when you ask them later, they remember those points of the question. And the original study, I think they said, how did you see the car do such and such when it was stopped at the red light or stopped at the stop sign? And there was no stop sign. And it seems like a really trivial thing because they're like, oh, there's a stop sign. This is something that wouldn't be implanted. And then they're asked if they see a stop sign. And almost everybody's like, yeah, obviously. But there was never one there because it was a leading question that implanted details. And there's one that I just think is so shocking. And it was, again, eyewitness testimony. And what they did was they showed people a scene that was completely irrelevant to the crime. It was literally just like a man in a cafe. And he was just sat reading a book or reading a newspaper. And then they showed a crime scene. And when later asked to identify the perpetrator, they picked the person from the irrelevant scene because they were familiar with that person. It wasn't actually anything to do with the crime or anything crime related or to do with that scene in general. It was just someone that they had seen in a prior scene unrelated, but they were more likely to pick that person out of a lineup.
Man. And I'm going to do a shameless plug here. If you're interested in this topic, on episode 134 of this podcast, Dr. Loftus was with on this podcast. I had a chance to meet her and I interviewed her about this exact topic. Yes, about this exact topic. The title of that episode is Altered Memories and Altered Realities with Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. And we talked about her research into this topic. Like I told you before, Abby, this has been something that I've been passionate about for years. So that was way back in 2020, I think, was that episode. So October of 2020, Dr. Loftus came on the show and we had a great. So if you're interested in what Abby's talking about and that particular researcher, you can check out that episode 134. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. And it's one of those good episodes in the past with a really amazing researcher.
Yeah,
so, sorry.
Absolutely do that because she was a huge research inspiration of mine.
She's amazing.
Well, so yeah.
Yeah, she was amazing. It was a great podcast, and she really went deep into her research into these altered memories and suppressed memories and things like that. So really awesome. We had a great conversation about the trial of George Franklin. And she had her experience with that trial, and I won't go into it because I want you to listen to the podcast. But yeah, we'll just leave it there, and I'll put a link in the show notes so you can do that. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to do a shameless plug, but so when you said her name, I'm like, I love Dr. Loftus. She's amazing. Yeah.
But going back to the eyewitness testimony, in cases where suspects were exonerated because of DNA evidence, false eyewitness testimony was 75% the reason why they were put in prison.
Wow, really?
75% of the time, yeah.
It's amazing that we could still use it at all in the judicial system. Considering like, I had this situation literally where I was driving down the road and a guy on a motorcycle had cut me off and almost hit my car. So I honked at him and he pulled a gun out on me. And he came up next to my window and he pointed the gun at my face and he started punching my mirror. And he flipped his motorcycle helmet up, and I clearly saw his face, but I cannot tell you what he looked like. I honestly can't. And when the cop got to me, the guy finally left and whatever, my car was all banged up and I was, of course, very shaken. So I called the police and the police came and did an interview of me and they said, "Can you describe him?" And I went, "No, I can't." Yeah. And they were like, "No, but you said he flipped his thing up and he was right in your face." I'm like, I can tell you he was white. That's it. And I go, I can't tell you if he was white Hispanic, if he was white, if he was Irish. I can't tell you. Honestly, I said, that whole memory is out. And I said, I could try to tell you, but to be honest, I'd be making it up.
Yep.
I said, I got no clue what he looked like.
It's a really good point because we tend to be more confident over our emotional memories. If it's something that is really emotional to you, you want that high confidence, particularly if it's like you've lost somebody and your last memory of them is this event. You don't want to believe that that's not true. But there's research showing that emotion massively affects our memory. And originally they used to think that high emotion was, it supported accurate memory. Really? And they used to believe this because they thought it was originally low emotion was accurate memory. But then they interviewed people that were on the Titanic, and they had said, the survivors had said the boat split in two. And scientists were like, the boat didn't split in two. Boat definitely didn't split in two. You have false memories of that. And then they actually found the Titanic and it split in two. So then there was this change that, okay, well, actually, maybe high emotion is accurate recall, but that isn't the case. We have so many studies now showing that it's actually this inverted U effect. So too low emotion means inaccurate. Kind of that average emotion is high accuracy. And then the more emotional it gets, it goes back to being low accuracy. So you really want neutral memories. Those are the ones that are more likely to be accurate.
Yeah. So before, and that's really interesting. It's before he pulled the gun out when he was just flipping me off and stuff. I can remember what his bike looks like. I can remember where his license plate was. I can remember the color of his shoes. I can remember the stickers on his bike. All of that is very clear in my head. Soon as that gun was pointed in my face, I thought, this is where I die. And I don't remember anything. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember. All I remember doing is taking my phone out and starting to record just in case I died. They have a recording of it or something, right? Yeah.
But now imagine that was, say, your last memory of someone that you were with. You'd be really motivated to try and keep that memory. Yeah. So you might try and create it. And there was research showing, how do you know if your memory is accurate or not? Like that is a question. How do we know?
Yeah.
And think about, for everyone listening as well, think about a really emotional, important memory to you. Think about it. Go through it in your head now. How are you remembering the memory? Are you remembering it from a bird's eye view? Is this event happening? Do you picture it happening and you are seeing it? Or are you inside the memory and you are seeing everything from your point of view?
That's the way I'm remembering it.
So if you're remembering it and you are part of the memory and it's from your point of view, it's more likely to be accurate. If you are remembering it sort of looking down like the bird's eye view, it's less likely to be accurate. Because think about it, you've taken yourself out of the memory and now you're recreating this scene.
Interesting.
And again, with high emotions, particularly ones of loved ones, like we said, we don't just pull out the memory, we recreate it each time. So if you are remembering a really emotional event, you're going to have emotions when you do it. So each time you recall it, you're going to implant those current emotions because you pull it out and then you put it back. So I need to now recall it and then I'm going to put it back. So if it's really high in emotion, every time I pull it out, put it back in, it is now slightly changed based on the current emotions that I'm in. And there was a great study actually showing that people's memory of 9/11 is most likely not their own memory because it's an event that is very emotionally charged, particularly for people that were observers of it. And they went around and asked people, what was your memory of this? Where were you? And they said where they were, and then they fact checked. And what they found is they were more likely to have, because it's something that people discussed a lot, each time they discussed it, emotionally charged, someone else told them where they were when they found out. Because it's one of those events that most people knew where they were and they can remember where they were when it happened. People were encoding other people's memories of the event. So when they asked people, where were you? And they said where they were, no, they weren't. But somebody else that had told them where they were there. And they encoded that as theirs.
Wow. That's interesting. And now that becomes their memory.
Yes. And you get very defensive over your emotional memories.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to my mum about this on a train because we were going to Birmingham or something, I think to watch the ballet. And I was reading this book all about false memories. And I'd said to her to tell me a memory that she had of her childhood. And it was one that, was really dear to her. And I said, so how are you remembering this? And she said, I can see it. And I was like, well, it's not true then. I was like, that memory's inaccurate. And obviously she got very defensive and it didn't work out very well for me. She wasn't very happy with me.
Yeah.
Through the whole ballet. I was like, nope, that's a false memory of you and your loved one.
Maybe that's not, maybe that's one point into life where being direct isn't always the best.
Yes. Don't take the approach that I took of just telling her, you know, that really cherished memory is false because people don't want to believe that. And sometimes just let people have those false memories. Yeah. Just let them have those loved memories, cherished memories. But sometimes it is really important to try and correct them if you can.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on how important it is to correct them, right? Yes. Like in certain memories, I think if it's life altering or you really need to know that this is not what happened in your childhood, then maybe that's good. But if it's like, hey, that time my dad brought me to Disney World, and if that's not real, am I really going to get hurt by believing I went to Disney World one more time?
Yeah. But I think this is a really good point to kind of finish up on that. When you correct other people's memories, what are you correcting it from? Your own memory? Because how do you know theirs is inaccurate, but yours isn't? Because again, we all want to believe that ours is accurate because our reality is our reality.
That's a good point. So maybe my 3 siblings are all wrong and I'm actually right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
It's just like we have to be knowledgeable on it because sometimes when it's a false memory, there's nothing you can do about it. If there's no direct evidence, if someone hasn't followed you around like, a Kardashian filming everything that you're doing, we don't have that luxury of our lives being a luxury or, whatever it is. We don't have that of our lives being reality shows where there is someone filming everything. So thankfully. Sometimes,
I mean, I don't know. I don't think, first of all, I don't think our lives would be so ridiculously boring.
It would be Abby sat at her desk again for the last 12 hours.
It'd be basically you and your cats, and it would be me sitting at this desk or cooking.
Yep.
And then it would be intermittent working out. Both of us do that, so it'd be intermittent working out. But it'd be such a boring reality TV show.
Oh, Abby's eating another cauliflower.
Oh, Chris is sitting at his desk again. Wow.
Yep. Well, they really don't socialize.
Yeah. They really have no lives. It'd be like one episode and people would be like, crap, I'm depressed.
That is an accurate memory. But when we challenge other people's memories and when we think about our own, just going in, recognizing that this could be flawed. And we have now, with all of this research into it, we have adapted the legal process. And we don't put so much reliance on eyewitness testimony, but we still do rely on it. Now we try and collate as many eyewitness testimonies as possible to try and get a bigger picture. But we just have to be knowledgeable, and especially when it comes to repressed memories. Because if you believe in this idea of repression, when science is very, very clear, the literature is very, very clear that there is no empirical backing that supports this any longer. And the studies that have shown it can be explained by other reasons. And, parents have gone to prison for abusing children.
Right. That never happened.
That they haven't abused. And then later evidence has come out that is inaccurate. That abuse claim was implanted by no malice. And again, it's not always purposeful. It can be with the best intentions, and it can be, just completely unconsciously, but being aware that memory is not often accurate and it is faulty and it is flawed. Just like almost everything when it comes to being a human being, we are flawed creatures, and memory hasn't escaped that.
So how does belief system work into our memories?
That is a really, really good point. So belief system has a really big effect. Like when we are looking for information. So we spoke previously about conspiracy theories, and we talked about the and in the perception podcast episode that we did. When we have a belief system, we want to maintain that belief. So we seek information that confirms it, and we disregard information that disconfirms it. Our memories do the same thing. Memory of information. So if we are taught something that is inconsistent with our belief, we are likely to forget that thing that we were taught, but remember things that confirm our beliefs. And we are susceptible to forming false memories about events that are congruent with our beliefs. Not only do we forget ones that are inconsistent, we create them that are consistent with our beliefs. Again, not with malice. We don't do it often purposefully. We do it because we want to maintain this belief system. So we do it unconsciously.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating to me because I remember talking with another researcher once about the first thing you said, which is ignoring information that when we're seeking information that kind of goes against, which we were having this conversation about like the dangers of social media, because social media kind of creates this environment where, as soon as I type into Instagram something I like, that's the only thing I ever see. So you can kind of reconfirm your worldview through that. But now, adding on to that what I will remember later on will only be the things that then reconfirm that. It's like a double whammy of kind of screwing myself into being very siloed.
Yep. And this is one of the reasons I love science, because it tries to be as objective as possible. Like science doesn't care about your beliefs. Science doesn't care what you believe in. It doesn't care what you want to believe in. Just like gravity doesn't care that you want to fly. It just is what it is.
That's what I was thinking when you said that.
it just is what it is. But even scientists, they're not immune to it too. I've read so many research papers that they just put in the evidence that they want in there. They cherry pick studies. And sometimes it isn't with malice, sometimes it is. But it's just something that we often do when we have this view that we want to maintain, whether it is a belief system or a view about ourselves or a memory. When we want to maintain it, we are all prone as human beings to want to maintain it. Whether that is in our writings or in our memories, however we do it, we want to maintain that thing. And it can lead to creating new memories, cherry picking information, cherry picking memories, or forgetting things that are inconsistent. All of those things go to that ultimate goal of maintaining a positive self-view and maintaining our belief systems.
So do we just say, okay, this is it, we accept it, and that's the way it is? Or do we try to fix it? Or like what is
Never just accept the bad as it can't be changed. Because although we're flawed, what I love about science and about our species is that our brain is so malleable. No matter how old we get, we can still learn new information. We can still learn and adapt through effort. When we are aware that this thing occurs, we can't necessarily stop it because it's a fault with the brain. It just is how we're wired. We're never, ever going to be able to have fully accurate memories. It's just never going to happen. But being aware that that isn't possible means that we can have a bit of understanding. And when we do remember our previous memories and someone's saying it's completely inaccurate, just think, okay, well, is there a way to get evidence of this? Or maybe don't stand so 100% I'm accurate with certainty on this, because no one could ever be 100% certain. And try and seek a better understanding of, okay, well, how do I encode things better? And again, like I said, with repression, the knowledge that it isn't possible, just having that knowledge is a huge advancement for the field. Having the knowledge that memory is faulty means that if you are relying on something really, really important, maybe don't seek someone else's memory of it as evidence. Maybe try and seek something different as evidence and just use that as, okay, well, this is pushing me in that direction, but let me confirm. Don't just go from people's words of an event.
Oh man, there's like two questions colliding in my brain, right? Because like part A is, how would we do that? Especially with something like, of course, this topic brings up a lot of things, mostly I would imagine for people listening and myself, about childhood, right? But then I think the second part of that question was, but how important is that? You know, like how important is it for me? So I have this memory from childhood. It's not really great, but how important is it for me to go seek evidence if it's true or not? And how would I even do that? Because it's only going to be based on other people's memories.
Yeah, I don't think that it's about going and seeking to confirm that our memories are true or not, because often we can't. And if we say it's a personal memory, we want to feel bad about it. Say we're talking about our trauma and we feel like a victim at that time, and we want to talk about times that we were victimized. With that motivation, we might create a more negative memory. And if we are seeking its accuracy, how do I confirm information of its accuracy? We're going to stay in that mindset. And the mind is a really powerful thing. We know that the way we talk to ourselves affects our cortisol levels. We know that our expectations of things affect how our bodies react to it. We can change our biology, our neurology, our physiology through the way that we speak to ourselves, and the way that we think really does matter. So if we have this much power and we are seeking to feel bad about our memories, or seeking to remember something happening a really specific way, well, it's just going to encourage that negative memory. And that doesn't mean that we just go, I can't remember anything in my life, nothing's important. It's about, balance. It's about just having an understanding that this thing might be flawed, but we do have a lot of control. We have a lot of control over how we act and how we think. So with that knowledge, we can say, okay, well, maybe it was as terrible as I remember. Maybe it wasn't. But that's not really the point, is it? The point isn't seeking to confirm that. It's seeking to confirm how I feel about it, why I feel that way about it, and how do I move forward? How do I now feel good about it? And sometimes saying, well, I don't know exactly how it happened, is the right thing to do. Think about how many arguments, whether you had them or listeners have had them with a loved one or a partner, over, well, you said it this way. Well, actually, I said it this way. You said it that way. And you're both just sure that you're right. Isn't the easiest thing to do to say, well, we probably might be both wrong, because if my reality is this and your reality is that, someone's reality is wrong.
Yeah.
Why don't we both just say, well, it could matter. It might not even matter, because we could both be wrong. Why don't we just move forward and think about why are we arguing rather than the memory being the argument?
I think it's important. So I have a thought on that, but I think it's important to note for people listening that when we say things like it's easy to control our thoughts, that those are for people who may not be suffering from emotional disorders or disorders that make that really hard to control, right? Because I don't want to make it sound like we're saying, look, just think your depression away and you're done, right? That's not the message,
it's
right?
Like the fake it till you make it speech that I do when people are like, oh, so just pretend you're happy. And it's like, no, that's not the point. It's not about saying, oh, well, I feel good now, so I guess I feel good. Because I said I feel good. Yeah. It's not about that at all. It's just about the fact that how we speak to ourselves, it matters. Yeah. We have an amazing power to change our biology with our psychology, and there's so much evidence of it. Doesn't mean that it's easy in terms of being able to do it. It means the process itself is very simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. It's like having good nonverbal communication is very simple. Doesn't mean that it's easy.
Right.
It's the idea of it itself is very, very simple, but in practice, it's much harder. Just like it's easy to now say, well, my memories may not be 100% accurate. Now go implant that new understanding and really use it in practice. So next time you have an argument, be a bit more lenient with that person, and don't stand 100% by your reality of your memory. It's much harder to do in practice.
Yeah, I apply this thinking like, we've talked about this before. Like my parents were not the best people, and they were quite abusive. And I spent most of my teenage life being very angry about that, and letting that part of their life affect how I was going to be as a person. Eventually, through therapy and other things, something happened where I was able to say in my mind, well, they did the best that they could with the tools they were given and the choices they made. I'm not going to let that affect how I live my life. Like, I'm not going to let their poor decisions have me make poor decisions. And it didn't stop the bad memories. It didn't stop the fact that they were horrible people. It didn't stop any of that, but it stopped me holding myself like in a mental prison because of it. Yeah. And I think that is a valuable part. I didn't alter my memories. It didn't make it any better. It didn't make it, go away. It stopped me like kind of punishing myself for the past.
Balance as well, because we have this tendency to think in black and white. That because memory's not accurate and it's not 100% reliable. All of my memories are rubbish and I should never think about something again. And anytime I have an argument, I should just let everything slide because it might be an inaccurate representation of what happened. We don't have to be that black and white about it. Just having a bit of understanding and having a bit of knowledge on the topic that it could be flawed is important, because nothing in life is black and white. That's just not how we're built. We're not built as these perfect machines.
Yeah.
We are flawed. And that understanding can mean that we are just a bit more lenient with it. We are a bit more educated on it. And that is important, really important.
That is the purpose of this podcast, is to bring this type of education to a field where maybe we haven't talked about these things before, and where this understanding can make all of our lives just a little bit better. And hopefully we're doing that. I know what doing it for me. I mean, I was going to need a therapy session after this. You just told me everything I think is wrong and all my memories.
Exactly. None of your memories are real anyway. So what does it matter?
What does it matter? Okay. Well, it's noon. I'm going to start drinking. So
it's fine. Just forget that you did. And
just forget it. Then I didn't drink. It's all perfect.
Clean. Clean.
Hey, thank you for all the research you did on this episode. And as always, everybody, there will be a plethora of research papers in the show notes, as well as links to that episode 134 with Dr. Loftus. And you can keep sending in your topics, because I think next month we're in a really controversial topic, aren't we, Abby? What are we talking about next month? We
are doing one of my least and most favorite topics: deception detection. I love and I hate it for different reasons.
So next month when you come, we're going to teach you all how to be human lie detectors. Right, Abby?
We're not.
But come back, because you're going to be human lie detectors by the end of next month's episode. That's the hook.
Well, listen, if you want to be a human lie detector, you should listen to the episode.
That's it. Yes, because we're going to teach you how to do it next month.
Maybe.
And you know what? And if you remember this conversation any other way, you're wrong. Your memories are all wrong, so it doesn't matter.
My memory's accurate, yours isn't.
So I remember Abby saying, next month, we're going to teach you all how to be human lie detectors. So join us next month on the Social Engineer Podcast, the Doctor Is In series. Thank you for joining us this month. Abby and I always enjoy these conversations. As you can tell, we probably laugh way too much, but it's a fun time, and we're always trying to learn new things. Thanks for joining us. Until next month, stay safe and secure. We'll see you then. Bye.